Earlier in the current chapter, I demonstrated the process for adding a web viewer to a layout. The FileMaker Web Viewer allows you to make live connections to content on the World Wide Web, placing a window to the internet within your database. You might recall that I set the example web viewer to show a Google search page. When I was describing that example, I mentioned that the web content could be dynamically linked to the data in your database. In this lesson, I'm going to take the process a step further and show you a slightly more sophisticated example. I have here a copy of the work file in which I've edited the author's layout to move the field content over to the left, so we have some space to experiment with adding a web viewer that ties to the content of each author record. In layout mode, I'm going to add a web viewer, and to begin with, the process will be much the same as you saw previously. I'll click on the Web Viewer tool in the status toolbar to select it, then drag with the mouse across a rectangular area of the body part, and then release the mouse button so that FileMaker displays the Web Viewer Setup dialog. Then, like before, I'll select the Google Web Search option. What you'll see is that FileMaker has pre-populated the web address with a URL. However, the last part of the URL is empty. It just has a couple of quotes and nothing in between them. Now for this example, I'd like to go a step further and provide the content that will specify what the search is to be when the web viewer is populated with data from the internet. So I'll click on the Specify button, which brings up a Specify Calculation dialog in FileMaker. We'll be talking a lot more about calculations later on in the series, but for the moment, let me just show you a very quick technique for adding some content from the current record to this URL that's going to be formed and determine the target of the web viewer. First of all, I'll delete those trailing quotes. Now, as you can see, a list of fields available in the current table appears at the top left of the calculation dialog. So I'll start off by double-clicking on the first name field to add it to the calculation we're writing here. So author's first name has now been added to the end of the calculation as part of the search query. Now I'll click on the operator for an ampersand to append a space, which I'll need to enclose in quote marks. The space will separate the author's first name from the author's last name. So I need the operator for appending, an ampersand, and then I'll double click on the author's last name. So now we have a calculation which has the standard commencing stem of a Google search and appends from the current record the author's first name and a space and the author's last name. Let's go and see what that looks like when we back out of here, accepting that calculation, and click OK to accept the web viewer setup specifications. And now I'll exit layout mode and we'll look at this in browse mode. And you can see that FileMaker has automatically performed a search on Google for Jane Austen, and we have a series of links coming up that feature Jane Austen. And of course, now if I scroll through other author records, you can see that for Dean Baldwin, we have a Google search pre-populated with links related to Dean Baldwin, and so on for each author record in the database. So now I have a web viewer in browse mode which will automatically perform searches. This setup is not necessarily something I'd want to keep in this particular database, so I've just created it as an example, but hopefully it gives you a sense of what's possible. And no doubt you can think of a lot of different applications. Showing a website product page on an order form, showing the location of an address in an online map page. Web viewers open up quite a lot of scope once you understand the basic principle.